In the land of Skyrim, there is a civil war raging across the land, where Nords fight each other under the banners of either the Stormcloak Rebellion or the Cyrodiilic Empire. And we, the player, get to decide who to pledge our sword to, who will become the High King, and who will control all of Skyrim. But while this is a war fought primarily by Nords and Imperials, there are 8 other races for us to play as, be them Orcs, Redguards, Argonians, Dark Elves, and all others in between. So the question is then raised, which side of Skyrim's civil war would each race choose? Hello my fellow hirelings of House Telvanni! I'm Neloth, and we are going to be answering that exact question in this very video. Before beginning, I just want to clarify that there are millions of reasons why an individual would join either the Stormcloaks or the Empire. Perhaps you were raised in Cyrodiil and brought up to support and praise the glorious Empire. Perhaps the Empire committed a great injustice towards you or your family, and you are out for revenge. But we are going to be looking more at the races and cultures as a whole and making educated guesses on what side of the war someone born in their own province would join, based on historical accounts and the political state of their province. But how about I start answering this question instead of yammering on, eh? First, let us start with the most obvious race and work our way to the more obscure, and I think the most obvious race to talk about are the Nords of Skyrim itself. Now, naturally, you might assume that all Nords would put on their thickest bear pelts and take up arms to put Ulfric Stormcloak on the throne of Skyrim, but remember that this is a civil war, meaning that all Nords have a 50-50 shot of joining either faction, and while not shown much in-game, many Nords are indeed part of the Imperial Legion. Those that wish to side with the Stormcloaks likely do so because they were outraged at the banning of the worship of Talos, an imperial god who had gained incredible popularity among the Nords in the 4th era. Even Nords that might follow the old Nordic pantheon and not the Empire's 9 divines may wish to side with the Stormcloaks for hope that a Skyrim without the Empire may lead to Nords moving towards the old ways. Besides, many Nords who respect the old ways may deem Ulfric's honorable duel against High King Torygg as just that, honorable, and may despise the Imperial propaganda machine for framing it as murder. Nords have also always looked down on all of elven kind, viewing them as weak since many use and rely on magic. So many Nords might not want to side with an empire that's willing to bend over to the Aldmeri Dominion and give in to their demands, especially since the terms to the White Gold Concordat at the end of the Great War were near the exact same as the terms given at the beginning of the war. If you're playing a Nord that was born outside of Skyrim, you may want to try and learn about your people and aspire to be exactly like those axe-wielding, pelt-wearing barbarians. And you may feel that joining the Stormcloak Rebellion will bring you one step closer to ingratiating yourself with your people, so that you, an outsider, a foreigner, may finally be accepted as a true Nord, as a true son or daughter of Skyrim. However, there are also many reasons why a Nord would not side with the Stormcloaks and rather side with the Empire. Contrary to popular belief, the Empire has always had a strong presence in Skyrim since the late Second Era, and the provinces of Cyrodiil and Skyrim have always been strong allies. When the Second Empire was founded under the leadership of Riemann Cyrodiil, Skyrim was being invaded by the Akaviri, and the Nords were getting their asses handed to them until they were aided by Riemann and his armies, and together they were able to defeat The Akaviri invaders. The entirety of Skyrim then pledged fealty to Riemann and his empire and were loyal throughout the Riemann dynasty and the subsequent Akaviri dynasty, which was a whole other thing I won't get into. In the very late Second Era, Tiber Septim claimed the Ruby Throne of Cyrodiil and started his conquest in Skyrim, and the Nords intended to fight back until they heard Tiber Septim's Thume, or dragon shout, and after a few short-lived skirmishes, all of Skyrim bowed before him, and recognized him as Ysmir and Talos, a true son of Skyrim. It also helped that a lot of propaganda involving Talos speaks of him being born in Atmora, the ancient Nord homeland, and raised in Skyrim, growing up as a true Nord. Now, I went on a bit of a tangent, but basically Nords have always been allies with Cyrodiil for thousands of years, and both provinces have a rich, united history. So it makes sense how some Nords would remain proudly loyal to the Empire even if they were to disagree with some of their actions. Besides, the Empire employs many Nords into their legion, and many had parents that fought in the Great War as legionaries. So some may wish to just follow in their footsteps. Some Nords might feel that Skyrim needs the Empire for both trade and protection, as the Snowy Land is in a disastrous state economically and militarily due to both the Great War and the subsequent Civil War. And there are Nords that may just dislike Ulfric Stormcloak himself, seeing him as a self-serving traitor who lusts for the throne and will kill countless people all for the sake of power. Besides, if you're a Nord that was born outside of Skyrim in, say, Cyrodiil or High Rock, you may have been raised in a place that idolized and respected the Empire, and such beliefs would have rubbed off on you as well. I know I said I wouldn't talk of races born outside their homeland, but Nords are a special case because you are treated as a foreigner that came to Skyrim from the Pale Pass in Cyrodiil. Simply put, if you are a Nord, it's really a coin toss on which side you choose since it is a civil war. Now let us speak on another obvious race, the Imperials of Cyrodiil. And to the surprise of fucking no one, an Imperial would very likely side with the Imperials because Cyrodiil is the seat of the Empire, and the Legion is an extension of their homeland. Additionally, all the reasons I gave for Imperial-leaning Nords would apply for the Imperials as well. However, I do want to play devil's advocate for a second, as I feel some Imperials may despise their current empire and rebel. Something I think was very poorly represented in Skyrim is showing who worships Talos, as we know that many Nords worship him, but the game fails to tell you that many Imperials also worshipped Talos. I mean, he founded the Third Empire and is an Imperial god and not associated with the ancient Nordic pantheon. If anyone should be pissed off at the signing of the White Gold Concordat, it should be the Imperials because that is their god. Perhaps you were someone who deeply worshipped Talos and was forced to flee your home out of fear that the Thalmor would get you. And you never forgave the Empire for forsaking their own god emperor, the man that literally reshaped the land of Cyrodiil from a thick jungle into a vast, peaceful oasis. Perhaps this hatred is enough for you to betray your own empire and side with the Stormcloaks, a cause that actually fights for Talos. However, in most cases, many Imperials would likely back their empire or simply wouldn't feel comfortable joining the Stormcloaks and killing their own kin. Next, let us talk about the Dark Elves, or Dunmer, of Morrowind, and my answer for this one might actually surprise you. Something many people don't realize, especially idiots who copy and paste the same "I used to sympathize with the Dark Elves until I played Morrowind" comment, is that there are actually two different types of Dark Elves that exist in Tamriel, each with extremely different political beliefs. those that were born in Morrowind and have a very isolationist and nationalistic viewpoint and hate the Empire, and those that were born outside of Morrowind in Skyrim and Cyrodiil that view the Empire far more favorably, like many of the Dark Elf refugees in Windhelm, for example. First, let us obviously talk about the Dunmer born in Morrowind, as that's the point of this whole video. Morrowind was part of the Empire at the beginning of the Third Era due to a treaty between Talos and the god king Vivek. But this treaty was viewed with disdain by pretty much all of the great houses of Morrowind and their people, excluding House Hlaalu, who actually supported the Empire. And sort of House Redoran, as they weren't eager to fight the Empire face to face on their own, as the other great houses wanted to retreat and fight using guerrilla warfare tactics. And while the relations between the Empire and Morrowind were tense, this relationship was taken out back and put down after Morrowind suffered through the Oblivion Crisis, and a few other apocalyptic events like the Red Year when the volcano of Red Mountain erupted, and the Accession War when the Argonians from Blackmarsh raided most of Morrowind. The Empire was weakened by the Oblivion Crisis themselves and were unable to really assist Morrowind after all these calamities. So Morrowind said fuck you and seceded from the Empire and even kicked out House Hlaalu from their position as punishment for supporting the Empire to begin with. Simply put, most Dunmer born in Morrowind would not be too keen on fighting for the Empire. Or the Stormcloaks either, since the Nords are seen as the ancient enemy of the Dunmer, as both races have engaged in many conflicts with each other. Dark Elves, who are Ashlanders or a part of the great houses Indoril, Drez, Telvanni, and likely Sadris, who replaced Hlaalu, would never ally with the Empire. But they may fight for the Stormcloaks as a way to take revenge for making Morrowind vulnerable and weak, and also to make sure the Empire is never strong enough to take Morrowind again. The Dunmer of House Redoran would likely feel the same way, as they had to raise an army themselves to defend Morrowind and do the job the Empire failed to uphold. But during the events of Morrowind, House Redoran actually had a positive relationship with the Imperial Legion, as they respected their honorable fighting prowess. And so some Dunmer of House Redoran may ally with the Imperial Legion out of respect rather than loyalty to the Empire. Though again, many in House Redoran do hate the Empire just as much as the other great houses and would more likely join up with the Stormcloaks instead for the reasons I already listed. But hey, I'm trying to tackle all of the angles here. The only Dunmer born in Morrowind that would support the Empire would be those who are still part of House Hlaalu, as they felt betrayed by their kin for being kicked out of power and feel the Empire is their only ally and only way of restoring the power and notability they once had. Dark Elves born outside of Morrowind, on the other hand, would very much support the Empire, especially those born in Skyrim, as they are treated as second-class citizens by the Nords, especially in the Northeast. They would feel that the Empire is their way of earning respect and making a better life for themselves and their people, as the Stormcloaks are clearly not willing to help them. Simply put, if you're a Dunmer born outside of Morrowind or into House Hlaalu and maybe House Redoran, you may support and fight for the Empire. If you are literally anyone else, you may just remain neutral or join the Stormcloaks to either take revenge or make sure the Empire can never be strong enough to control Morrowind again. Moving on to the Bretons of High Rock, who are actually fairly simple, as many would simply side with the Empire. The Cyrodiilic Empire has lost its grip on pretty much every single province except for High Rock, which still remains as one of the last loyal provinces. Ulfric's Stormcloak even sent word to the Bretons asking if they would be willing to aid his Stormcloak rebellion in their cause, but they never sent word back, showing their disinterest in fighting the Imperials or aiding the Nords. Ulfric even responds by saying that their disinterest should not be surprising, as the Bretons have never had issues with the Empire, showing that High Rock still benefits from being a part of the Empire and wouldn't gain much from being independent, at least not during the events of Skyrim. And High Rock has always historically been associated with the Empire anyways, being strong allies with pretty much every variation of it: the Elysian Empire, the Riemann Empire, and the Septim Empire. So if you are a Breton, chances are if you're going to fight in the Civil War, it would be on the side of the Imperial Legion. Now for, in my opinion, the most politically interesting race, at least during the Fourth Era, and that is the Redguards of Hammerfell. See, the Redguards are divided into two different cultures: the Crowns, who are more traditionalist, and the Forebears, who are more liberal. The Crowns are more attuned with their ancestral heritage and Yokudan gods like Satakal and Aleki, and very much dislike the foreign Cyrodiilic Empire. Yet the Forebears have embraced many other Tamrielic cultures and even worship the Imperial Nine Divines and are supporters of the Empire. Because of that, you would think that the Redguards would have a 50-50 shot of siding with either the Imperials or the Stormcloaks, right? Well, not really. See, before the Great War, not only did the Thalmor demand that Talos worship be outlawed, but they also demanded that large portions of Hammerfell be given to them. The Empire rejected these demands, which led to the Great War, and the Redguards were fully behind the Empire as they were not keen on being a part of the Aldmeri Dominion, especially since the Redguards have historically held a deep disdain for Elves, even killing all of the quote-unquote left-handed Elves back when they were on Yokuda. However, when the war ended and the White Gold Concordat was signed, portions of Hammerfell were still given to the Dominion, which the entirety of Hammerfell rejected, forcing the Empire to renounce Hammerfell as a province of the Empire to preserve the peace, which the Redguards understandably saw as a complete betrayal. In the end, Hammerfell fought the Thalmor on their own for 5 years and were successful in driving them back, keeping Hammerfell Dominion-free. This also made many Redguards believe that signing the White Gold Concordat was a mistake and that the Emperor Titus Mede was a coward who lost his nerve. So if you are a Redguard, there is a very strong chance that you would desire to join the Stormcloaks, as you may see them as allies since they also despise the Empire and the White Gold Concordat. In fact, the only reason why Hammerfell hasn't allied themselves with the Stormcloaks is likely because most of Hammerfell was devastated from fighting a war by themselves, and are much too weak and vulnerable to dedicate resources to a foreign war, resources that should be put towards rebuilding. If you are a Crown Redguard, you would never side with the Empire in a million years and would probably become a die-hard Stormcloak. If you are a Forebear Redguard, you would also likely not side with the Empire. However, there may be some that believe that Hammerfell allying with the Empire again would be the only way to drive back the Thalmor once and for all. As the final line in the book The Great War says, "All those who value freedom over tyranny can only hope that before it is too late, Hammerfell and the Empire will be reconciled and stand united against the Thalmor threat. Otherwise, any hope to stem the tide of Thalmor rule over all of Tamriel is dimmed." If you are a Redguard, I'd say you have a 75% chance of going Stormcloak and 25% chance of going Imperial. Similar to the Bretons, the Orcs, or Orsimer, are actually fairly easy to pinpoint who they would most likely side with, as it would be the Empire. Be them Stronghold Orcs or Orsinium Orcs. Historically, many Orcs would often serve in the Legion and were considered to be the finest soldiers throughout the Empire. And many Orcs we come across in-game often speak of their time they served in the Legion as blacksmiths and legionaries. be them from strongholds or those that left their strongholds to pursue a different life. It also helps that when Orsinium was ransacked once again by Bretons and Redguards in the early 4th era, the Empire actually supported the Orcs rather than the Bretons and Redguards. And they did their best to save and provide refuge for many Orsinium refugees by giving them safe harbor in other Imperial territories like Skyrim. When Orsinium was later rebuilt in the mountains between Hammerfell and Skyrim, it was recognized as an official part of the Empire and was protected by legionaries. Now, to be fair, this friendship between the Orcs and the Empire is fairly new, as it did not exist during the Third Era with the Septim Empire, as Talos or Tiber Septim was famous for his hatred of the Orcs. But I would actually argue this would make the Orcs even more likely to side with the Empire. Because why would an orc want to safeguard the worship of a man that considered their kind to be nothing but animals? Simply put, the Empire has done surprisingly well for the Orcs during the 4th era, and I just don't see why Orcs from Orsinium especially would fight such a beneficial ally. The Argonians, or Saxhleel, of Blackmarsh are an interesting topic moistly, because by the 4th era, many Argonians within the province are very isolationist and nationalistic. In most cases, Argonians would likely be neutral, as they would not have much of any stake in Skyrim's civil war. Although the Nords in Windhelm, the capital of the Stormcloak Rebellion, do treat the Argonians rather horribly, as they receive very little pay for their work and aren't even allowed within the city and are forced to live outside on the docks. Some say it's because the Nords separate them to avoid conflict with the Dark Elves, but watch my Curious Case of the Grey Quarter video for why I don't believe that to be true. For that reason alone, an Argonian may decide to join up with a more cosmopolitan empire in order to protect their fellow Saxhleel. But to be fair, Blackmarsh was one of the first provinces to secede from the Empire, and perhaps there are some that may want to see everyone be independent from the Empire. Even then, I still believe any Argonian that finds themselves in Skyrim would remain neutral or side with the Empire. The Khajiit of Elsewhere are also quite an interesting topic given their relation with the Thalmor and Aldmeri Dominion. And after much debate with myself, I believe one would mostly remain neutral, but maybe might support the Stormcloaks. Let me explain. On one hand, the Imperials have historically treated the Khajiit like shit and have subjected them to brutal invasions and occupations. The Riemann Empire invaded and the Khajiit tried to rebel on numerous occasions. When Elsewhere was suffering from the Nahatan flu and were fighting literal extinction, the Longhouse Emperors and Colovian armies saw free real estate and plowed right in. Euraxia Tharn invaded the city of Rimmen and occupied it for years and treated the Khajiit so cruelly that they would make Windhelm blush. And her son Javad Tharn led a campaign to basically destroy and conquer a region of Elsewhere called Reaper's March and tried to corrupt the Main. Though, to be fair, the Tharns were acting independently as the Empire was gone at that point, but Khajiit sees no difference. Then, years later, Tiber Septim led a brutal campaign to take Elsewhere, where he killed large populations of Khajiit, be them men, women, or children who refused to accept imperial rule. Tiber Septim also used the Numidium, which was a walking brass god that wreaked havoc on the Khajiit populace as well, killing even more. The Septim invasion was so brutal that many accounts of it were stricken from imperial record. The Count of Leowyn in the game Oblivion, Marius Caro, also treats the Khajiit like second-class citizens, and even has a torture chamber where he tortures Khajiit and Argonians for shits and giggles. Simply put, the Khajiit have historically always been treated cruelly by the Imperials and their empire, so it is unlikely that they would side with the Empire, especially since many Khajiit to view the Empire's enemy, the Thalmor, as heroes since they allegedly brought back the two moons, Masser and Secunda, which had randomly disappeared from the sky for 2 years. Which was a nightmare and a half for the Khajiit because the moons are literally core to everything about them. Some Khajiit may want to take revenge for the bloody subjugation they have faced historically and fight the Empire by aiding the Stormcloaks. But I also doubt that the Khajiit would be excited to help out the Stormcloaks given their disdain for outsiders. And also wouldn't be thrilled to fight for the freedom to worship Talos, a man who has the blood of countless innocent Khajiit on his hands. Additionally, if a Khajiit traveling to Skyrim had ties to the Thalmor, they would probably remain neutral as that is in the best interest of the Thalmor as stated in Ulfric's dossier. So for a Khajiit born in elsewhere, 9 times out of 10 they would remain neutral, but there is that one time where they might actually throw in with the Stormcloaks. The Wood Elves, or Bosmer, of Valenwood are another interesting one, but I actually think that a Bosmer would be more inclined to join the Empire. See, the Empire hasn't treated these Wood Elves the best, only being alienated by Imperial neglect, which isn't great, but a lot fucking better than the Khajiit, I'll tell you that. But the Thalmor have likely treated the Bosmer worse because they have not only overthrown their original government with one that supports the Thalmor, but they have also been systematically eradicating and purging certain Bosmeri families that were likely seen as a threat to the Thalmor. And according to the book Rising Threat, the number of Thalmor supporters that were Bosmer are not as many as you might think, leading to an increased likelihood that a Bosmer would dislike the Thalmor and support the Empire, as they see them as the best way to fight back and defend their homeland. The Bosmer are a nationalist and isolationist people, however, if one were to venture to Skyrim, I think they would support the Empire or at the very least remain neutral. But I just can't see a Wood Elf really siding with the Stormcloaks for any reason that isn't personal. And now we have come to the last race, the High Elves, or Altmer, of the Somerset Isles, the race that controls the Thalmor and the Aldmeri Dominion. I believe an Altmer would generally be similar to the Bosmer, and would either remain neutral if loyal to the Dominion, or join the Empire if not. Now, the Altmer do not have the best view of the Empire, or humans for that matter, as many consider themselves to be superior. And they kind of are to an extent. Even the Pocket Guide to the Empire, which is heavily biased towards the Empire, admits that. The High Elves are taller, live longer, are more magically gifted, and more beautiful. Well, sometimes. So being a vassal to a human empire was quite frustrating and humiliating for many. Additionally, Tiber Septim didn't just use the Numidium on the Khajiit, but he also used it on the High Elves too, besieging the city of Alinor in hours and killing many great High Elf battle mages in the process. Now, all this has caused great resentment for the High Elves and is one of the reasons why the Thalmor were created. However, after this defeat and a few more afterwards, there were a great deal of High Elves on the younger side that believed the superiority complex and xenophobia of the Altmer was no longer necessary, and many pro-Empire revolutions began to surge among younger Altmer, which may lead some to side with the Empire if they also believed the same as these cultural revolutions. I feel that many people that don't read much into Elder Scrolls lore believe that all the Altmer are pro-Thalmor, which could not be further from the truth. The book Rising Threat is written by a High Elf that is vilifying the Thalmor and saying they are a true danger to all of Tamriel. It also states, quote, "Contrary to the posturing of the Empire's generals, the Thalmor did not command greater numbers. They had better spies and greater mobility and knew how to use them. This is the menace that the Thalmor represent. They are cruel and merciless, but they are no fools. They are devious and subtle, and so very patient." Additionally, the Thalmor have also massacred many Altmer that were not seen as pure-blooded, and one such event happened in the Night of Green Fire, where the Thalmor killed many Altmer refugees fleeing the Thalmor. Simply put, many Altmer don't actually like and fear the Thalmor, and this fear may lead them to forget about the misgivings of the Empire and their superiority complex, and join the Empire, all in the hopes of preserving and rebuilding it, so that they may fight back against the Thalmor and beat them in the Second War. Although, if you are playing an Altmer that is loyal to the Thalmor, you would definitely want to remain neutral and let the Civil War continue for as long as possible. Similar to the Bosmer, I just don't see an Altmer joining the Stormcloaks who deeply hate the Altmer for understandable reasons, unless it were because of a more personal reason. So let us quickly summarize. The Nords are a 50-50 because it's a fucking civil war. Imperials are for the Empire because no shit. Dunmer would be Stormcloaks if from Morrowind due to anti-Imperial sentiment and the Empire abandoning Morrowind in its hour of need. But if they were born outside of Morrowind or were of House Hlaalu, they would definitely join the Empire. Bretons are for the Empire because they have always been good friends. Redguards would definitely be Stormcloaks because the Empire needlessly abandoned them in their eyes, and some might desire vengeance for leaving them to fight a deadly war for 5 years. Though if they are a forebear Redguard, they might forgive and support the Empire. Orcs would be for the Empire because they have been really good to them in the Fourth Era, providing both opportunities and helping to protect the next new Orsinium. Argonians would be rather neutral, but some might aid the Empire due to how the Stormcloaks treat their kind in Windhelm. Khajiit would typically just remain neutral, but would definitely not join the Empire because of the many massacres they faced. However, it is possible one would join the Stormcloaks for revenge for the past. Bosmer would side with the Empire as they weren't treated completely horribly by the Empire, and many would see the Thalmor as a threat. The Altmer are the same as the Bosmer and would join the Empire, even more so to help them rebuild and grow in power to fight the Thalmor, as they would hate the Thalmor more than anyone else. And that's all I wrote. A video where I tried to help you choose what faction typically one of the 10 races would choose based on their upbringing. Again, let me just state that these are just generalizations, and there are a number of personal reasons why an Orc or Imperial would join the Stormcloaks, or a Khajiit or Redguard join the Empire. This video isn't trying to force you into a side solely because of your character's race, but rather provide insight and guidance so you can make a more informed decision on what side you feel your character should join the next time you play Skyrim. Be sure to let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and let's hope it's actually role-playing lore insight on the races and not just 4 paragraphs on why you personally hate the Empire or Stormcloaks. You know who else gives me great insight? My channel members, and they are Mirak, Sovdark, Will Ernst, The Proud Prince, Luis Eduardo, JJ Ensid, Milani Stilla, Grud, Ranger McKay, Luxie, Carson Friday, Dova 2023, Abdullah the Goat, David Correa, Kirill Gaming, Dalton Rupert, I Love House Hlaalu, Felix Rianis, Cosmo, Jarinish Evento, Grabowski, Serene Molly, Smooth Weaver Walkthroughs, Anka RMZ, Bane Hellborn, Shinigami James, Gret, Peter Illing, The Ember Raven, Cat Lassie, and Jorinaris Targaryen. So with all that being said, make sure to like the like button, like the subscribe button, and like the bell notification down below to be updated on future videos. And I will see you whenever the fuck I decide to upload again. House Telvanni be with you.
I suppose you want to be asked nicely. Very well. Please, O hero of Skyrim, I shall be ever so grateful.